Hello here and welcome again to another edition of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, and full disclosure, we're taping ahead of time, but this is our spring football preview show and kind of building around the spring break week and basketball travel that's coming for both Robin and Sip. So what we're going to do in this special edition of the Husker Online Show is a full-fledged preview of spring football. Later on in the show, you'll hear from Abby Barmore as we have a special spring preview mailbag, but this is a part of the show that we like to call opening headlines. So let's discuss the big opening headline here of spring practice, year 2 of Matt Rule. I think it starts with Dylan Raiola and kind of what that picture looks like. And by the way, they did tweet a picture of Dylan Raiola in mat drills. It's one of the first times I've seen him. Good. And it was in their final mat drills that were Thursday before spring break. They went inside the stadium and did mat drills in the evening at 8:45 at night, and then the players took off on Friday to go off for their spring break.
Yeah, mat drills. Matt Rule wants those guys to be uncomfortable. 8:45 practice sounds a little uncomfortable to me.
Outdoors.
It's good to see Dylan out front. He should be out front. I mean, he's probably the projected starting quarterback. I mean, let's not talk around it. Now, I don't think Dylan probably cares one way or the other. I think he's just shown up and put in his work. So, but okay, that would be storyline number 1, right? What's storyline number 2?
Well, I think Sean said it, year 2 of Matt Rule, where a year ago, everything was brand new. Like everyone was learning on the fly. Players were learning coaches were learning players. Everybody was just trying to figure out the expectations and all that stuff. Now that's cemented and guys know what to expect. And you have a lot of returning veterans that are helping set the tone. So this is where that whole conversation of the jump from year 2 is the biggest one usually a program makes. And I think this is probably a critical time with these mat drills and the leadership that's being established right now, from newcomers like Dylan Raiola to your returning seniors like Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmaker. I mean, this is where it begins, and this is where I think you're going to first start to see the difference between year 1 to year 2.
I'd say third headline is how good the defense. How
Tony White
keeping
back.
Tony White.
How good can the defense be? It was 11th in the country in total defense last year. It was 7th in the country in average yards allowed. You can count up and find pretty much, it's subjective, but 17 players that played pretty prominent roles on that defense. 17 guys with significant
it's the benefit
experience.
of rotating as much as they do.
Exactly. So how good can the defense be is a big question in my mind.
Yeah, and what will the picture of spring look like in year 2? I mean, last year they had 6 scholarship quarterbacks, 2 are out, but they made them live. Like now they have 3, which is to my knowledge, it's the smallest number they've ever had in the history of this program.
I don't know if you can make them live, can you?
I don't know if you could have less than 3 quarterbacks on scholarships. I'll go on record and say I believe this is the fewest number of scholarship quarterbacks Nebraska's ever had on a roster. So yeah, are they going to be more careful with those quarterbacks? Will there be any? Will Dylan Raiola take a hit this spring?
Common sense dictates that you don't make them live very often.
Maybe once or twice, but again, you can't afford an injury there. With the lack of depth there. I mean, you have Harburg who's back with starting experience, but you just don't have much.
Well, yeah, and you kind of know what you have now with Harburg compared to a year ago. You had no idea. And one of his biggest attributes was his physicality and his running. So why not allow him to showcase that in a live setting? Now you have plenty of film. You know what that whole picture looks like. And then obviously with Raiola, I don't know if, like Sip said, common sense leads you to say, let's make this freshman live for this veteran defense to just whip up on them for a whole spring.
You know, Rob, the counterpoint on that, though, what makes it complicated is they have to develop. Daniel Kalen and Raiola, for sure, they have to develop. And Harburg, I mean, we've talked about it. He's still pretty young. He's not even old enough to go in bars. His game can develop. So there's a fine line the new quarterback coach has to walk here.
Yeah, and that's a storyline. And we'll talk more. And we have an offensive segment, so we'll hit on Glenn Thomas more in that discussion moving forward. But these transfers, I think in general, they didn't take a lot of them, but I think they took a lot of impact transfers.
No doubt.
And what will the impact of these 6 guys be? There's 23 new faces here for the spring. 17 are high school, 16 of those 17 are scholarship, and then you have 6 scholarship transfer additions. I mean, that's the most newcomers I can ever recall in a spring. I don't know if you could have much more than that, what they've added as far as 22 scholarship newcomers that are already here.
Yeah, that's gigantic. And I think leading the way in that, as far as those transfers go, are those 2 receivers, Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nayor. Jamal Banks had 59 catches last year at Wake. I mean, 59 catches last year for 653 yards. Nayor he's had 1 reception in 2 years, but he was a big time weapon at Wyoming the last time he played a full season. Hey, Rob, 12 touchdowns in a season for a receiver. We haven't seen that at Nebraska in a while, right? 12 in a season.
Nope.
So those 2 guys are really, I mean, I guarantee you when we have a chance to watch those few opportunities we get, those 2 big receivers will really stand out.
Well, yeah, especially Nayor. I mean, just watching him, just seeing him in public and the eyeball test that he presents. It's been a long time since Nebraska's had a guy with that body type, with that length.
You and
that
Sean
height.
saw him, right?
Yeah, he was at the St. Michael's
deal.
speaking event.
And Nayor made that big of an impression, a bigger impression than Banks.
I mean, to me.
Interesting.
They both are huge, though. I
Yeah.
mean, just that edge blocking and, those little hitch routes where a corner has to tackle you. I mean, they could probably get a lot of 6-7 yard plays with those guys just on the edge where they're going to get you in 2nd and 3 because they're going to get you on schedule with those plays.
And they get downfield.
They get off the line of scrimmage because a little corner is not going to hold those guys.
Nayor is probably your bigger down threat of the 2. Banks averaged 11 yards per catch, which is good, not great. Nayor at Wyoming averaged 20 yards a catch on 44 catches. I mean, he's averaging 20 yards a catch. He's your downfield guy if he's right.
So a lot of people always ask, what kind of access do you get? What do you get to watch? We don't get to see much. And, we get to go to every practice to do interviews. And we'll probably hear from Coach Rola twice a week. But there'll be 3, maybe 4 days where we get to go in, and it's just the first 30 minutes. And it's pre-practice walkthrough. It's stretching, maybe individual periods, but no team periods. So, people are like, how does so-and-so look? It's really hard, to say, man,
Flexible.
So-and-so looks really good. I mean, when
That's not much to see.
when that's the picture you get to see. If you don't get to see a true team period, whether it's 7-on-7 inside run or true team, it's hard to make huge takes other than just eyeball takes. Like,
Especially in the trenches, like evaluating offensive linemen or defensive linemen in that setting is worthless. Like anybody that tries to have these like big takeaways from those 30-minute windows, they're just making stuff up. Really.
No, pretty much. I mean, you're trying to see how guys move. I mean, there's some instances where, I remember watching Teddy coming off his knee surgeries and saying, man, he's a bad mover. I mean, it turned out he was a bad mover. Right? So sometimes you can kind of see how guys move, but then it can be really deceptive. I mean, Jeff Sims looked incredible when he was thrown against air. I mean, the ball really spit out of his hand, and you could kind of fall in love with him. I mean, he's a big horse out there.
they did.
Yeah, and you can see why coaches would. I mean, he's a very good-looking athlete.
And he runs.
Ball comes out of his hand really well, but it doesn't matter. You got to see how they are when there's a pass rush.
All right.
There's a possibility of getting hit.
When we come back, we're going to continue the discussion of offensive storylines heading into spring practice. You're listening here to the HuskerOnline Show. And we're back here on the HuskerOnline Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett here. Before we get into some offensive spring storylines, this segment of the HuskerOnline Show brought to you by Omaha Stakes. Omaha Stakes right now is having their semi-annual sale. Get 50% off site-wide and save on mouth-watering favorites today. Go to omahasteaks.com/Husker and shop the semi-annual sale where you can load up on all your delicious flavors you crave at half the price. From their classic, tender, juicy butcher cut filet mignons, mouth-watering pure ground burgers, comfort classics, and easy-to-prepare meals that are perfect for those busy weekday nights. Plus, as an added bonus, you'll get 8 free Omaha Steaks hamburgers on select packages when you shop at omahasteaks.com/Husker. With Omaha Steaks, the possibilities are endless. endless flavor and endless value on incredible entrees, sides, desserts, and more. All of them are at 50% off during the semi-annual sale, and every bite is backed by their 100% conditional guarantee. Visit omahasteaks.com/Husker to get 8 free steak burgers as well on select packages when you shop that semi-annual sale. Hurry, because this deal will not last. That's omahasteaks.com/Husker. Thanks again to Omaha Steaks for sponsoring the Husker Online show. Okay, offensive storylines, guys. We've hit on quarterback, but what about Danny Caitlin? I mean, it's always Rola and obviously Harburg, but man, this is a big spring for Daniel Caitlin, and also our first taste of Glenn Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Caitlin wants to come in and establish himself as, well, I was just going to say the top backup, but my guess is a guy of that caliber athlete is coming in to win the job.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope he doesn't take himself out of it because the fans take him out of it and the sports writers take him out of it. But the bottom line is it's kind of what we talked about earlier. He's got to make progress. There's got to be a lot of progress made quickly. And how will they do that if he's not getting hit much? That's going to be a kind of a tricky needle to thread.
One way that they can do it, though, is by only having 3 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster.
Reps.
Those are going to be reps aplenty for all 3 of those guys. They're going to get probably more work for a freshman scholarship quarterback coming into his first spring than maybe anybody. And that, I think, is going to help with that development. And what an opportunity to really showcase what you can do. I mean, you're going to get chances upon chances against the top level defense. And what happens if he starts turning heads and starts making the same throws, if not better throws than Dylan? And then all of a sudden, maybe it's a different conversation going into fall camp.
Yep.
You're listening here to the Husker Online show. Let's move it over to running back discussion, because no Gabe Irvin or Ramir Johnson this spring. They're going to be recovering. So we mentioned Emmett Johnson, but Dante Dowdell, the transfer from Oregon, is going to get a huge opportunity. And Quentin Ives, the true freshman from a year ago.
And Emmett Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Emmett first. Those 3 guys are going to get a lion's share of the carries this spring.
Huge.
And they'll get good reps. And, can somebody emerge from that group as a one? And then you would have to figure both Irvin Jr. and Ramir Johnson are going to be factored back into the offense when they return.
Yeah, you need 5 at that position minimum. So, Emmett Johnson comes off a pretty good year, 90 carries, 411 yards. That's 4.6 per carry. That's pretty good. Dowdell carried it 17 times last year at Oregon for 90 yards, was shuffled back. So what's Dowdell look like? That's what you wonder. Also, Emmett Johnson shows up for the dunk contest. Was it February 25th? I think it was. The dunk contest at halftime of the Minnesota basketball game. Big. He looked big. I mean, he's put on size. That picture intrigued me. In fact, I thought it was Irvin when I first saw him. I thought that was Gabe Irvin. Irvin's a big bag. What?
Totally different sizes.
No, I thought, but
Gabe's like 6'1", probably.
That's my point, though. Emmett looked big.
Yeah.
We're pretty far up too.
It's all right. So I'm equally interested in Emmett Johnson because I thought that he was by far the most consistently productive running back of that group, just with injuries and all that and turn fumbles and all that stuff. But then the amount of kind of unprompted praise that Matt Rule himself put out for Quentin Ives has been intriguing me for months. Like he played a tiny little bit, like enough to just give him a taste of it. But I'm very curious to see, especially with this spring and the limited numbers they have at running back and the workload that he's going to get. We talked about the quarterbacks getting reps. Ives is going to get plenty of reps as well. How is he going to take?
I'll be surprised if he emerges over those other guys.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, what's he going to do with that opportunity?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I guess Emmett Johnson a year ago was in a similar position. But I just, from what I've heard and know, I think the other guys will be better than him. I mean,
Dowdell and Emmett Johnson.
Yes. Yeah. And then the 2 coming back. It'll be interesting to see because you got to remember, Ives was a late take. I mean, it was like they had to just get a running back, and it wasn't like they courted him and recruited him for a long time to Nebraska. And Emmett Johnson was a late take. So they haven't really been able to recruit like a true high school running back, or they courted him the whole process since back to a guy like Gabe Irvin Jr.
Dowdell is that type of running
back. But
they
just recruited him from the portal.
Right. That it's different. Like if but I guarantee you he was courted by teams.
Everybody,
like
yeah.
their number one guy.
And they had one in Kewan Lacey. They lost.
Yeah, that's the big one.
What about Malachi Coleman guys and Jalen Lloyd at receiver, and just can they emerge and kind of lock in spots? And we don't talk about this guy either. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda.
Yep.
He's back. We've heard Coach Rola mention his name the last few weeks, but you go back, he had over 100 yards receiving in a game in Ireland a couple years ago, and can he at least get in that rotation? I'm not saying he's going to be the leading receiver, but is he a rotation guy?
I would think so.
Yeah.
He's 28 years old.
He's 28.
He's pretty old. I don't know if he's 28, but he's pretty old. So he's experienced. Yeah, you would think he'd be a guy that would. You wonder about Jaden Doss. The big ones are Jaden Doss, Malachi Coleman, Jalen Lloyd. Alex Bullock's back too.
Demetrius Bell.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Demetrius
And
Bell.
you'll have Davon Hall here for the spring. So that's one to watch.
Oh yeah.
And I believe Keelan Smith, I believe, is here for the spring too.
Right. I don't know whether to put him at tight end or wide receiver.
We haven't listed him and Carter Nelson are very similar.
Hybrids.
But I would say he's listed as a receiver by Nebraska.
The leading returning receiver is Alex Bullock. He had 15 catches last year, 221 yards. But those young speedsters are a little more enticing to you, right? Jalen Lloyd, Malachi Coleman, and Jaden Doss. I wouldn't ever leave Jaden Doss out of these conversations. And then you have the big horses transfers. They're here, Isaiah Nayor and Jamal Banks. Those are your main guys. That's who we're talking about, unless you're trying to throw a true freshman in there.
I think having Garcia Castaneda as a third or even fourth option, that's a huge luxury to have, because he was potentially one of their top guys last year before he got hurt. He got hurt really early, but he was being targeted a lot. And coming out of fall camp, there was a lot of praise about the work that he had put in since returning to Nebraska. So, just the depth that we're talking about now at receiver.
They have more.
Well, it's better.
Yeah.
It's better, especially if the transfers are what we think they can be, and they're two top flight guys, and then you're supplementing with all those other guys. That's
looks pretty good
with the returning guys like Coleman, Lloyd, Bell, Doss, with Bullock coming back, and then Garcia Castaneda. That's some quality depth.
It looks like the room of a Big Ten team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that last year.
Yeah, where you're like 3 or 4 deep total.
Right. This looks more like a Big Ten school wide receiver room should look like.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk defensive storylines next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, talking defensive storylines. But before we get into that, segment of the show brought to you by our newest sponsor of the Husker Online program, Mando. And Mando, what that is, you're not familiar with Mando. They're great products for men to help you smell better. They're men's fragrance products, deodorants, dermatologist recommended, fragrance oil free. They're organic, 100% natural. They're a great product. I've got a box they sent over to my house, high quality stuff. They've got everything from shampoo to deodorant, lots of great products to try out and check out. And we've got a awesome deal for our Husker Online listeners. Just go to shopmando.com, use promo code Husker, and you'll get $5 off a starter pack, which equates to 40% off of a starter pack. That's shopmando.com with the promo code Husker to receive that $5 discount code. Check it out at mando.com. They've got some great products and fragrance things and deodorants for men. Check it out, mando.com, and use that promo code Husker to get $5 off your first order. All right, let's get into the defensive storylines, guys. You look at things for Nebraska, and I think Tony White is probably, and we've hit on this a little bit, but he is kind of the first big storyline because you're getting him and his entire staff back with a bunch of old dudes that have played a lot of football.
Well, yeah, you have 3 of your top 4 tacklers back, 4 of the top 7. Isaac Gifford is a key one. He's led the team in tackles last year with 86. But the list is long. Javin Wright was your 3rd leading tackler last year. He's back. John Bullock is back. Those guys are critical because as we've mentioned, they're the inside linebackers. Productive. Both of them. They're Javin had 51 tackles. Bullock had 50. But yeah, overall, you have a lot of guys back, a lot of intriguing guys back, a lot of guys up front, critical guys. Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, Jamari Butler, critical. I mean, those guys. I mean, those are the kind of guys you win with in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and you're talking about guys like Cam Lenhart and Princewell Uman-Mielen that are in year 2 now.
100.
What's that jump going to look like?
Yeah.
And so you also have guys like Kai Wallen and Riley Van Poppel.
Yeah.
I mean, players that you saw sniffs of. James Williams coming back. So I mean, like the depth up front
good point.
is where it starts, but you can make those same conversations at all 3 levels to where the defensive line is clearly the strength. Secondary is loaded, like you said, with Gifford, but Tommy Hill coming back. You got Buford coming back off his injury. Deshaun Singleton coming back off his injury. Malcolm Hartzog, who's played a ton of football. Bly Hill, who's coming in as a highly touted transfer. So, I mean, like the depth there is, I think, just as important. And then if they can figure it out at inside linebacker, which there's plenty of pieces to work with, it's just a matter of who is going to emerge and who can kind of stabilize that group. That defense could be pretty darn good. And to the point we made in the opening segment, just the number of guys that have played coming back. I mean, not just like returning veterans, but guys that have played substantial snaps in Big Ten games, which is, again, goes back to that benefit of how much they rotate and how many guys they give opportunities, not just to keep their starters fresh, but to build that depth and experience to where now you're already seeing it going into year 2. I mean, there's recognizable names that are proven commodities as opposed to kind of relying on guys that have never been on that stage before.
Another guy, Deshaun Singleton, he was out last year with injury, and I thought he was one of their better guys before the injury. And to see him back there, and we really only got a small taste of Marquise Buford last year. So the back end of this defense could look a lot different with those 2 back there. You would assume Tommy Hill is a corner. Isaac Gifford is kind of in that hybrid role that he's really thrived in. And then I think the other question now is that other corner. Is it Bly Hill, the transfer? Hartzog.
Jeremiah
Charles. I mean, they've got some, Dwight Boodle. Don't rule him out either. No. They've got some options, I think, at some of those defensive backs.
Yeah, they're pretty. Here's the thing. They were good. We established what their credentials were, 11th ranked total defense in the country. But there's plenty on film you can show them that, hey, we weren't perfect. We were far from it. And they didn't get stops at key times. I mean, Tony talked about it on our video. Third down wasn't great. They were 45th nationally in third down, opponent percentage on third down. Not terrible, but not. Robin, come on, we watched those games. Wisconsin, they could have shut that game down. They didn't shut the game down. The defense didn't shut it down. Gave up a huge play against Iowa late.
Maryland.
Maryland. So Michigan, I thought they got shoved around. Or Michigan State. Michigan State, I thought they got shoved around. So there's plenty on tape that Tony can show them that, hey, this is where we can get better. Yet they did enough to come back with a lot of confidence. So it's a pretty good mix.
Well, that confidence and the production that they had all came in spite of having an offense that turned the ball over seemingly every other possession. So the amount of bad spots they were put in to still put up those numbers is really incredible. And so you would hope that their performance, not only just with all they're bringing back and the benefits of year 1 from year 2, but just having an offense that's going to help them. And then you keep the ball. Don't put them, spot the opponent at your own 40-yard line. That is going to be just as valuable for this group as anything.
They were really stressed by the offense, by an offense that led the country in turnovers.
Yeah, you look at just the situations that they were in. I mean, they were lucky to get out of a lot of those situations. And a lot of it was the offenses of the Big Ten weren't good last year. I mean, there wasn't a lot of elite quarterback play.
No.
After Shedeur Sanders and J.J. McCarthy, there really wasn't a lot of great quarterback play Nebraska faced all year. I mean, the Wisconsin guy looked about as good as anyone they saw late in the year.
It's not like he had a great year, but he had a good game against Nebraska running the ball. So there's enough there, but there's enough there on tape that shows these guys they can get better. But man, they have some good veteran players coming back. And you give a nod to NIL on some of that, getting a guy like Ty Robinson back here, probably a guy like Isaac Gifford back. These players are well taken care of nowadays, and they should be.
All right, when we come back, we're going to get into the mailbag, and we've got a lot of spring football questions in the mailbag that we're going to dive into with Abby Barmore. We'll get to that next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, Abby Barmore, as we're going to get into the mailbag here for spring practice. But before we get into that mailbag, it's brought to you by who, Steve Sipple?
Sean, Larson Motors. If you're looking for a new vehicle, or even thinking about looking for a new vehicle, be kind of fun to go for a new experience in Nebraska City at Larson Motors. Larson Motors is one of the Midwest's only dealerships with all the major brands in one location. Finding your new Chevrolet, GMC, Hummer, Ford, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram never has been easier. Start your new experience today at LarsonMotorGroup.com or at Larson Motors in Nebraska City. And you know what we always say, Larson Motors, real people, real deals.
All right, let's get into the mailbag, Abby. It's our spring football preview show. Where are we starting off at?
Which 5 players need to have a strong spring?
I mean, I think you have to say Dylan Raiola, just because you want to feel good about where that's heading.
How about the backups too? You could just take out 3 of them right now. 3 guys.
Harburg
And
it's
Daniel
probably his
Kaler.
chance here.
Yeah, you need them all. I mean, I would say all 3 quarterbacks. That's what
Yeah.
I'd say.
What about like Gabe Irvin?
Needs to have a spring. He'll be available in the spring?
No, he's not.
Oh, see,
Ramir Johnson and Gabe Irvin are out.
see, they're out.
I think it's a big spring for Emmett Johnson.
Yes.
That's
He's
a good
got
one.
to kind of mark. He needs to mark his ground here.
100. Yeah, he can mark his ground. It's a huge spring. It is now that you mention it, huge spring for Emmett Johnson.
He almost took out Matt Rule in the dunk
He
contest.
did, but he looked good. He looked. I mean, it kind of reminded me of Amir Abdullah. When Amir came here, he didn't really look like a Big Ten running back, but when he left, he looked like a Big Ten running back. And Emmett Johnson, now that looks like a Big Ten running back.
What about Thomas Fedoni?
Yes, big spring.
I mean, I just watched Carter Nelson at state basketball, and I mean, he's fluid. He's explosive. I mean, they're different. I mean, they're different kind of athletes, and there's, the competition in that room is going to get interesting. For I think Thomas Fedoni, he needs to kind of mark his spot here.
Yeah, or just. I mean, I would
Advance.
almost look at it more like establish yourself as a real weapon, a week-to-week big play guy. He had 25 catches last year. He had a good year, but can he have a great year?
What
show that
about
this
defense,
spring.
though? Like, who do you got, Rob?
One more on offense, Prohaska. They need to solidify the left
because
tackle.
Corcoran's
Tackle
out.
situation. Not a lot of depth there. They
Right.
need their top guys to be top guys. I'll go that inside linebacker room.
Oh, yeah.
I want MJ Sherman to step up. This is an opportunity. Makai Bayer, those types of guys.
Gavin Wright.
Yeah, that are all in that group, that conversation at that inside linebacker spot. That's probably the biggest question mark on the defense right now.
It is.
Going into the spring. So those guys need to step up and solidify that a little bit.
Brian
Next to
Buschini,
Bullock.
too.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like
Tailed off.
He had just some really rough moments, and a 20-yard punt in a Big Ten game really is a big deal because
Mhm.
it gives a shorter field to offenses last year that weren't very good.
100, Sean. And then you know what? They are looking for a long snapper. That Ortiz was excellent. We never even breathed his name last year because there was never any I don't even think there was any close calls.
Not that I remember.
No, he's a guy. He was really good. Now, so Camden Woodtucky is the guy. I mean, he'd be that. Well, he was the second string guy last year. He's a kid from Michigan. He's a junior from, I think it's Grand Blanc, Michigan. I'd watch that one too.
All right. What do you got next, Abby?
Robin, you touched on this one, but what is your 2 deep projection for the linebacker spots?
Oh boy. All right. Well, Bullock is for sure in that conversation. And right now, I think Thompson's certainly going to be in that equation when all's said and done, just given the acclaim that's followed him. And then it's a matter of, how is MJ Sherman going to evolve into that role? Princewell. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you got the Jack has got to be.
Jack is the complicator.
Are we including the Jack in this?
That's
or
the
not?
complicator.
Because are we calling the Jack a linebacker? Are we calling the Jack like an edge?
I don't know.
I think it was just
I
inside,
think
right?
I feel like he's coached by linebacker coach though.
Princewell.
Right? The jack position, right?
Yeah,
That's
I
what I
think
think.
Yes, Knighton. I don't think Knighton coaches the Jacks.
These
You forget about Chief Borders,
you sure do.
and
Mhm.
you didn't mention Makai Bayer. Makai Bayer is probably a projected
Probably.
starter. right now.
Yeah.
And Javin Wright would be a projected starter with Bullock. I mean, those three, and then Stephon Thompson,
Mhm.
MJ Sherman. And then it's a matter of, how do you play that jack? Because Borders can play the jack. Sherman can play the jack.
Mhm.
The one other name I'd add that you watch now is Dylan Rogers. I mean, he's a scholarship guy. He's a redshirt freshman. He didn't play last year, but
Didn't hear his name much. Though.
no, you heard it. You know what? Rule talked about him late in the season.
I remember.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I would watch Dylan Rogers, number 52, too.
All right. What do you got next, Abby?
Which player with no to minimal playing time do you expect to make an impact this spring?
I'm going to throw out the receiver, Demetrius Bell.
Okay.
I think he's a guy that, he had an academic red shirt last year. So he wasn't able to play even 4 games. But I think that's one, that I'll go with on offense. Honestly, the transfers and guys coming in they weren't here last year. So it's hard. I don't see a lot of other real big surprise faces.
Guys that were here.
Jeremiah Charles would be one.
What about on the offensive line at one of those guard spots with guys like Gatula or
Sledge,
Sledge.
Gatula, Knutson. Those are your 3 redshirt freshmen, big names.
It'd be a big jump for them, but they got a lot of positive talk last year.
Mazuka though so your guards, you got a lot of guard. You got obviously your center back, Ben Scott.
Mm-hmm.
But
guards. You got
Lutovsky,
Justin Evans.
Evans Jenkins, potentially Mazuka. As
Henry
a guard,
Lutovsky.
And Lutovsky. You got 3 veteran guards there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Corcoran, we don't know what his future is.
Right.
He could redshirt too, by the way. Corcoran has never redshirted. And so he could play 4 games this year and redshirt if he wanted to go that route. But yeah, I think Sledge, if you were going to throw one in there, could make a jump. But again, they returned so many key pieces on that O-line. I don't see.
They do, but it's when you get to looking at it, as I did, not the depth is. You don't have a lot of experience depth.
That's a lot of teams though in college football.
True. But Robin is exactly right. Gunnar Gatula could be a number 2 tackle. Sam Sledge could be a number 2 guard.
Now Gunner's playing some guard now. His father was at St. Michael's, and he told Brian that Gunner had been working some guard too.
Yeah, Brock Knutson is somewhere in this conversation too, and you wonder about Bricks. I mean, Grant Bricks.
He's here early.
Yeah, he's here early, and he could make a move pretty early. I'd say guard. I don't know where they'll have him, but I think he could play guard. I mean, he played tackle in high school.
What about Sua Lafatu as like a nose tackle body to get him ready to replace Nash Hutmacher in the future?
Yeah, he'd be definitely a guy to watch. Rules mentioned him prominently
more
than once.
We got time for one more as we kind of rambled our way for these first few to get done.
Okay, our last one. So obviously this is our spring football preview. What is your most memorable spring football moment?
I definitely have one. You guys can go.
You go first, Seb. You already got one. I want to hear yours.
Yeah. Well, Sean, I would be standing by Sean, and maybe Rob. I'd stand by you. It was stunning that first spring when Callahan was here, and they were implementing the West Coast offense. They didn't really have the quarterback to do it. God bless Joe Daly. He's one of my favorite players of all time. But there was one moment we were standing on the fence. We could watch all the practices, every minute of every practice. And I just noticed, and I think I might have turned to Sean, there was a series of balls being run back for touchdowns by defensive players. And I said to Sean, is this like a defensive drill? Nope. And Sean said, nope, he's just having problems. And they were taking them back for touchdown. There were 2 or 3 in a short amount of time. And I thought to myself, they're taking those back for TDs. Mm-hmm. So, but they were really, as you recall, there was a huge struggle that first year in the West Coast offense. Yes, and we saw it in the spring.
Yeah, the 05 spring scrimmage with Zach Taylor is still probably my most favorite memory. I mean, they went 200 plays probably in this.
They had to go find a quarterback.
And Taylor had the flu, and the quarterbacks were live, and he was sacked at least 8 times live in a scrimmage. Jay Moore sacked him like 4 times.
He got a tooth out and everything.
And he was bloody. Yeah. I mean, that's the last Big 12 player of the year Nebraska's had on offense was Zach Taylor.
And he emerged in that practice.
And that was, I mean, and we got to watch it. I mean, it was like a 3.5 hour scrimmage. You know, another one too for me was Roy Halou, how he just kind of emerged. And when Pelini got here, everybody was obviously Marlon Lucky. And Bo always was high on Halou. Like he knew Halou was a dude. And you saw Halou emerge in Bo's first spring and turn into an NFL running back.
Rob.
For me, he didn't really do anything at Nebraska, but the spectacle that was Bubba Starling in his brief spring here at Nebraska.
He wasn't here in the spring.
Well, he was there on Fan Day.
That was in the summer.
Oh, okay.
So Bubba Starling showed up in June, basically to leverage the Kansas City Royals.
That's close to spring, though.
And it was here for 2 months. All your research and hard
early
work
June.
has just been thrown out the
right.
window, Rob.
Okay,
Sorry.
Think
So-
another one. Think another one.
But that let's just take it back to that whole recruitment. How about that?
Yes.
Where like this
That was
is one of the
freak show.
prized quarterbacks that was such a star here at Nebraska and then never even end up playing a
It was
snap.
a crazy recruitment.
That Fan Day. It's not spring at all, but I'll go back to it because it's the reason I was thinking about it. Was they had the quarterbacks like in the corner and the end zone, and the line for the QBs went the full 100 yards past the end zone into the next tunnel just for Bubba.
And he
Starling.
used that for leverage.
Yeah, it was
It was a contract leverage play, don't you think? Isn't that
yeah,
what that
he
was?
stretched it all the way into fall camp. I mean, that would be more of a fall camp man because he showed up to classes just to make the Royals squeeze out another.
I will tell you this.
My fall spring was screwed up on that one.
That's okay. I will tell you this. Probably could be a major league scout. I obviously can scout football players very well. Probably could be a major league scout. I went and watched, joking, but I went and watched Bubba play baseball. And there was no question in my mind he could play outfield in the major leagues. It was incredible to watch him. There's no question he had speed. He would steal third base standing up. And this was good. These were good high school games. He was incredibly fast, had an incredible arm. I watched him in batting practice and thought, I don't know if he's a hitter. He couldn't hit a curve. And I saw it right away. I was like, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be able to hit the ball in the major. He didn't.
He played in the Army All-American
Whitey
Bowl.
Herzog.
He played in the Army All-American Bowl too. He was highly decorated.
Good football player.
Very highly decorated.
So he would have been like an option quarterback.
Like a Taylor Martinez quarterback. I don't know if option.
I got a new answer. So my high school, I was able to shadow Steve Sipple during the spring game. You probably don't remember it. I just kind of sat.
Not remember.
I just sat next to you, and I remember going through that whole thing. It was my first taste of Nebraska football, learning from the greatest.
Are they still doing that?
It wasn't a total turnoff.
No,
You
I mean, I didn't really I just kind of watched. I didn't get a lot of advice or insight. You were too dialed in, but it was good. It was good. I got to go down to the press conference. I vividly remember standing next to Carlos Polk, and that was like my first realization of like how big these dudes actually are.
You stood next to Carlos Polk.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, he was he was an inordinately big linebacker.
Yes, he was.
He was. He's a big middle, Sean. Do you remember him?
Oh, hell yeah.
Big middle.
6'2", 250 probably.
Yeah, big middle.
All right. Well, that wraps up the
Thanks,
spring
Rob.
football mailbag. When we come back, we'll close the show. We're going to talk some Big Ten spring football storylines. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. Final segment here of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washay. Guys, I want to talk just some Big Ten spring football in general because I do think there's a lot of intriguing storylines across this league. Number one, the league's bigger. It's 18 teams. What do you think, by the way, when they do like those Big Ten like fall camp shows? Can you imagine like how hard that's going to be now? Like, is there any possible way that crew of guys can go to 18 places in August?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, the tour?
Coast to coast.
The tour
Yeah.
with Jerry DiNardo? No.
I wonder if they'll have like two teams now, kind of like a 9-man West group and kind of like a 9-man a crew that goes east.
Yeah, I don't know. As far as storylines go, I mean, Michigan obviously is the national returning. It's the national champion returning. So you watch them pretty close. They lost a ton, including probably one of the top 3 head coaches in the world right now, Jim Harbaugh. So Sherrone Moore takes over. What will that look like? Ohio State's loaded. We know that. I'm really interested, for instance, in the Ohio State running back picture. They have Trayvon Henderson coming back with Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss as a transfer running back. I think about that running back room for a second.
Yeah.
Trayvon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and whoever else they got.
in an offense that's being coached by Chip Kelly.
Yeah, hello.
I mean, that in itself is a major storyline with the quarterback change. Will Howard taking the reins.
How
there,
about that?
in
It may
theory.
be. I mean, I think there'll be a battle for that job.
Yeah, it will be. But either way, Ohio State, this is a critical year for them. I mean, and Ryan Day, like it's probably do it or move on type time for them.
It's funny.
Which is crazy to say.
It is, because I think he's 35-3 in the Big Ten.
But who are those losses coming to?
3 losses to Michigan.
That's all that matters. It's like it's Tom Osborne and Barry Switzer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think there's a major advantage with him against Sharon Moore.
You'd think.
I mean, and you have Chip Kelly.
Yeah, you think
like
so.
Going all in.
Like who is Sharon?
They win all in. That's
is Sharon Moore? Who is Sharon Moore's version of Chip Kelly?
I mean, nobody.
It's just gonna look.
Sharon Moore.
Could Sharon Moore get the Eagles head coach job in the Redskins? I mean, like Chip. I mean, I just don't look. I mean, what Ohio State's done and built the quarterback position, the staff, what they've done, they're a playoff team.
Oregon and Ohio State are clearly. I mean, they're clearly the top two. One would think Penn State would have something to say about that, but man, I mean, Franklin's lack of success against Ohio State and Michigan is sort of startling. So you can't really put Penn State on the same plane as Ohio State at any point. Ohio State's beat Penn State 7 straight times. So no, at the top two, it looks like Oregon, Ohio State. Oregon's loaded up. Oregon's like an SEC team.
Mm-hmm.
Their trenches are like an SEC team. They don't come in to this league, Oregon, and you're not thinking, oh, I don't know if they're physical enough. Oh, they're physical enough. They'll be fine in that way.
And they can run it.
They can run it. They're a physical team. I mean,
yeah. And then with the USC, they've completely overhauled their defensive coaching staff to where like they're kind of rebranding themselves to where defense was optional for a long time out there.
Terrible.
Now, how's that going to work in the Big Ten? So that transition now of this West Coast pass happy style of football, they got to start preparing themselves for a whole new world that they're getting into.
I think USC is going to have a tough transition to the Big Ten.
I do too. So is UCLA.
And I'll go back to when Nebraska played Lincoln Riley in Norman that year. And Scott Frost put together kind of a Big Ten game plan. They went heavy and physical, and they almost won in Norman.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a good Oklahoma team.
Pretty good. Yeah, Lincoln Riley. On the other hand, it's think about Tony White. Tony White's got to prepare for a lot of different looks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now you throw USC into the mix where they spread you out and they have a ton of speed on offense.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to catch the Washington game last season because the game that Nebraska played was during the daytime. And I was struck by USC's speed on offense. Wow. So you got to defend. I mean, it's going to you don't see a lot of that in the Big Ten.
Though in November.
That's a good point. But they'll play out in California when they play Nebraska and be fine weather-wise, I imagine.
The contrast, though, between those offenses to Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean,
so you'll see a lot of Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
Purdue. Well, Purdue's, I don't know what the hell Purdue does, but it's quite a contrast.
There's 5 new coaches in the Big Ten this year, too. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of new faces and a lot of new eras being ushered in this spring as well.
And guys, they protected USC where they're not going to have to play a lot of those weather games. So here's their month of November. They're at Washington November 2nd. That's just
it's Pac-12 game.
It's like playing in Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got Nebraska and LA, you got UCLA and Pasadena. Then Notre Dame comes to LA. So
protected.
They have Rutgers home game in LA on October 26th. Their deepest road game is October 19th at Maryland. So
that's a tough one.
You're not going to see USC be forced to play a Big Ten elements game. They're at Minnesota on October 5th, and they're at Michigan on September 21st. So I do think they got a pretty good year one schedule where they're not going to be forced to go to like Madison on November 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're right. Boy, but look at that. That's the USC schedule right there. So, I mean, it's fascinating. USC's playing Michigan, Penn State,
Nebraska, Notre Dame.
That's the beauty of this new configuration. Those matchups are incredible.
Well,
those are dream matchups.
Think if Florida State joins this league.
Yeah. This is what Trev was talking to us about. You can't look at college football through the prism of 1993 anymore. It's like the NFL now. You might throw a 8-4, and it's a pretty good season.
Mm-hmm.
or a real good season. That it's, I mean, we're heading into that kind of direction, like that NFL type way to look at this. Am I wrong?
No
Am I
doubt. I
wrong?
mean, 9-3 is going to be a good year in this league.
I'd say real good. I
You know,
mean,
just the quality of wins you're going to have
yeah.
with that schedule.
And if they keep adding, and I always say Florida State because I think it's very realistic. Florida State's in the Big Ten. They're going to leave the ACC
Inevitable.
because the ACC is not going to like restructure to appease Florida State. The question will be, will the SEC or will ESPN let them leave their television networks to join the Big Ten and Fox and their
Florida
brands?
State's really something to watch right now. I don't
And they're not an AAU team, so we'll find out if that really matters because
Nebraska's not an
Yeah, I was
AAU
gonna
team.
say.
they're trying to get back.
Yeah, they are. They're making some moves. Then they were an AAU team when they joined the Big Ten, and then they were quickly ushered out of the AAU.
I think people might think we're talking about like a basketball team.
We're
here.
not.
We're not talking about AA or an academic.
Yeah, and I don't know what AAU stands for, Robin. I don't know what
Hey,
that's.
we all went to Nebraska.
So we're not in the AAU anymore.
They didn't claim us. AAU, and it's not like it's Sean's. It's not AAU boxing. We're talking
Academic Association of Universities.
About. Is that what it
maybe?
is?
Is that
Is it the Association of American Universities?
I was close. I was close.
Close enough.
The Association of American Universities.
71 universities, both public and private.
So we should mention Nebraska begins spring ball March 24th.
It's a late start.
March 24th, and the spring game is April 27th with a 11 a.m. kickoff that Sean loves. That he is very in favor.
Hey,
of
it's
the
going to be an
athletic-
earlier post-game show.
I love it as well.
All right. Well, gentlemen, had a lot of fun putting together the spring football preview show. I'm going to let Steve Sipple off now to do basketball with Robin. Robin,
Okay.
you've got to take care of Steve.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, this is a big show.
And if he gets
We'll
out,
handle it.
if he steps on your toes in Minneapolis,
Yeah, I
just
mean,
call me.
no, I'll be like, hey, listen, you're my assistant here, and you just
Thank you.
help me out as needed.
You're just going to write non-byline game stories,
Staffers.
staff reports.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
I bet there'll be plenty to write about.
I'm sure there will.
Well, if you're not a member of Husker Online, great time to join us. Spring football around the corner, March Madness basketball. Try us out. Get 2 months for $1. Simply use promo code NU1. That's promo code NU1. 2 months for $1. For Steve Sipple, Robin Washett, Abby Barmore, I'm Sean Callahan signing off here for another edition of the Husker Online Show.